All right. Hey, folks, welcome back. This is Artificial Life Creation Count Up. We are at T+4 and sinking. If we're supposed to be swimming, kind of sinking. Multicellularity is hard. That I have struggled a lot this month. Enough so that I'm wondering a little bit about whether I can even really do this, or do this in certainly any kind of finite time. You look at that natural evolution. The Cambrian explosion was this, 500 million years ago, when over a relatively small period of time, 10 or 20 million years, there was obviously a architectural breakthrough in multicellularity that allowed multicellularity to take hold and then go crazy. I love the Cambrian explosion. I think it's super fascinating. But, as far as what I'm concerned with here, 500 million years ago is not the number that's important. What's important for me now is that, here's the earliest multicellular life, fungi possibility, about 1.5 billion years ago, but single-celled life is more like 4 billion years ago. So there's something like 2.5 billion years that I'm supposed to be saying I'm going to do in 6 months, or some kind of analog to it. A little bit of pride, a little bit of hubris, maybe. Yeah. So, can I do this? I don't know. I show you what I got. I made progress, but it was tough. It hurt. The development process is painful. I mean, I had other things that were kind of fun, but man. So okay, here we are. All right, let's try looking at this is the state of the art. If folks that have been familiar with this is a whole new kind of cell membrane. Looks kind of like a chip now, with little leads sticking out instead of all that sort of brown goo, intercellular goo. The intercellular goo is gone. I was trying to get more precision for how they register with each other and be able to send more information, not more information, but more accurate information through. And, this at the moment, I've lost a whole bunch of other behaviors, so this thing doesn't know how to change direction or lose any fins or so on and so forth. That was the big success. And so, and again, I don't know why I'm having so much trouble with my buttons. I did not look into them. And okay, so where were we supposed to be today? We were supposed to have clean living fish. No. Well, I mean, they're kind of clean only because they don't do much stuff. Second species started, no way, not even close. And I am increasingly resigned, not to say happy, to think about it being the multicellular menagerie will be all about the fish. If there's any little happy mushroom or something, that would be great. Second half plan, I have some ideas. More big fun. When I put aside the development stuff, April was good in a lot of ways. Stuff with friends and family was good, and stuff with other things were good. So let's just push into it, good and bad. Okay, robustness demo. Oh, yeah. And so this happened. I mean, so the previous fish with the intercellular goo that have all kinds of terrible problems, they've been running on the grid for all of April, basically. And here's a little sample of it. Whoops. And if I could just try to figure out how to get the correct button here. All right, here we go. And folks that were watching the live stream, they were seeing the April run on the thing. Look at that. Lotus 2, the power supply failed. It didn't fail hard to zero. It failed to like 6 volts when it was supposed to be 12 volts. And all of these tiles up in Lotus 2 just went nuts. I bought I sprung for a Meanwell. This is the thing, oh, this is nice. I soldered the connections on and I put the wrong gender on. So, okay. But now it is, now we're getting 11.5 volts and so forth. And, not to put too fine a point on it, but this thing survived. Lotus 2 crashed. It didn't lose itself. It kept on going. It was down for a day or more. Well, actually several days because I ordered a new power supply and so on. And eventually I stuck a new power supply in, and it actually came back up. I don't want to claim anything for it because I think it was luck in most purposes. But hey, that's what was supposed to happen. The tile, grid so big, matrix so big that parts of it are always failing, like that. So anyway, all right. So now, yikes. So the schedule. Supposed to be, this is almost identical to last month's schedule, which is as far as progress, which is a little scary. I've called increased code density. I've greened that out because I think that is not a problem for what we're currently doing. We can get enough, in fact, I've stuck a few extra instructions in and moved them around and stuff like that, and that has not been a problem. The existing machinery, the loader and all that stuff takes care of it, and it's good. Coordinated movement, well, you saw it's hard there. And junctions and intercellular signal were supposed to be the topic for this month, and in fact, that is where I ended up going, and we'll talk about it right now, I guess. So yeah, so membranes 2.0. Part of this whole project of trying to build a whole new computational stack is one of the hardest parts of it is when you actually succeed at some given level. And now you're supposed to go and build on top of that. It's just like when I was in grad school, and the older grad students when I was in graduate school, they were working on parallel computers. Their faculty and hardware students were building new parallel computers, or exploring it. It was the new stuff. And there were other graduate students that were doing parallel software. And what all of us little munchkins learned, the new grad students learned from this experience is that you don't let your thesis depend on somebody else's thesis, because the software parallel software guys were getting really folks were really getting screwed by this whole thing because the hardware stuff wasn't working. They were changing it out from underneath them, and it was terrible. And that's what I've done to myself here, right? I built our own hardware, got our own programming language, our own compiler, and then this giant mountain of Ulam code that just to get the diamond matrix going, and so on. So, yeah, okay, maybe I was a little glib, things a little bit easier. And as I said last time, the design, and this is again the same thing. My thesis, depending on my previous thesis, it currently takes 8 minutes to build the software from standing start, because it builds from a standing start each time. It doesn't have any incremental compilation facility. And anybody who's a programmer knows that the amount of time it takes to make a tiny change and then try again has a tremendous impact on how much productivity you're going to end up getting. And an 8-minute loop is tough. It's really tough. So nonetheless, where we got to last time was the whole idea of sending signals from a controller near the center of the diamond out to the edge to say, what is out there? Do you see other diamonds that, if so, can you get me some information like about how big they are and exactly where they are, and send that back to the center? That's the fish fin and the fishbot diamond controller. And we sort of got it working, but it was working so sloppy and terrible that the fins kept flying off. And I became convinced that what we really needed was more accurate. It would be nice to have more timely, but the speed of light on the grid, you can only go so fast. So did a whole new implementation. And that should be chords, not cores. So I did something I didn't want to do. The diamonds, the HC3 atoms that make up a diamond now have an actual absolute coordinate within relative to the diamond. There's still no absolute anything, but I had been avoiding putting an absolute chords in because it felt like going with the old school thinking, where I'll just lay everything out flat and then I'll have all the flexibility I need, as opposed to thinking about what do you really need now. Well, I broke down, I made HC point, a hard cell point, and it's an absolute coordinate, and I used it some. I re-implemented the membrane, and in particular, instead of saying we're going to take all our information and ship it to the center, and then it's going to decide, oh, we've got an edge over there and an edge over there, we should do this. Instead, we're going to make these junctions. We're going to distribute the information back to the edges or somewhere in the middle of the diamond, saying, I want to have a fish fin junction on this side, and over on the other one it says, I want to have a fish bod junction on this side. And the fish fin and the fish bod are supposed to have enough information, enough knowledge to know, is this coordinate where I want it to be? How well are we lined up? So instead of sending the entire position and orientation of neighboring edges back to the center, the junction reduces that information itself. It boils it down to a diamond stance that says for each of north, south, east, west, how much it likes or dislikes movement in that direction. So it reduces it all and just passes up, I would like north or west, please, and I would really dislike south or east, or whatever it is. And the cool thing that came out about that was that once I had it spread out, once I had the information spread out, 4 things representing liking the directions, 4 numbers representing disliking the directions, now it was possible to merge diamond stance signals coming from multiple edges and multiple atoms along an edge in the mesh, in the grid, without having, they don't have to all go and reach the root. And instead, as soon as they see another one of their own kind, they do a merge. You want south? Oh, I want south too. You want no east? Oh, well, I want no west. And so you put it all together and it gets to the top. And the thing at the center does very little beyond saying what possibilities do we still have now that there's an opportunity to move. And that's what we just saw in the antenna. Oh yeah, I didn't even mention antennas here. So instead of the intercellular goo, we have these probes that stick out that get exact information. It's always outdated by the time it gets to the edge, and from the edge to the junction, and the junction all the way to the center. It's always outdated. But now it starts out actually site perfect. That from this side, that guy's center is minus 26 plus 13, whatever it happens to be. All right, so running a little bit long. I'm going to skip the demo now. I will come back around maybe during the live stream afterwards and play with it some more. Okay, big writing fun. So we had the submission to the Artificial Life 2023 conference, waiting for results through most of April, and the results are the paper got accepted for an oral presentation, and that's as good as it gets pretty much through this channel of submitting a paper. So that was cool, and I have to say I had quite a bit of fun actually writing it. A programmable replicator for an indefinitely scalable machine. We demonstrate a programmable mobile self-replicator for a non-deterministic. There's our jargon and so forth. Just right down to it, and I felt confident about just say it. I don't need to puff it up. Just say exactly what happened. 20-day case study. Here it is. So on and so forth. Did a big, essentially a whole poster version for Figure 1. This is in the negative and so forth. And there's one, and they're reproduced. And here's like a whole bunch of them where it all reproduced out, and so on. And I kind of let myself go a little bit, and one's supposed to be careful. So in the conclusion section, for example, I said talking about in particular, we may admire but will not emulate heroic attempts to do the least possible thing, use the least number of bits, the least number of things, because what we really want to do is be useful, not to be minimal. It is possible to do all computing with just NAND gates, but real computers don't. Indefinite scalability is hard enough. We don't need to also tie one hand behind our back. So that was talk about a little hubris and everything. And indeed, reviewer number 1 really did not like the paper. They suggested a rejection. They didn't suggest a full-throated rejection, but they had lots of problems and kept telling me I needed to do better science and so forth. I asked for that. I'm okay with it. I will not be actually traveling for this. This is going to be a hybrid thing, so we'll have to deal with it, but step by step. And all right, and we're at a time, but I want to step back from even monthly updates at the moment. So I'm saying 2 more updates, maybe 3 months apart, something like that. And instead, I want to work on coming out with a video on the Dave Ackley channel, a more approachable by more folks kind of video. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about what kind of topics might be fun, might be into it. And publishing something we'll see. And that is it. So thank you so much for coming. And I hope to see you in a month. I hope to see a little better multicellularity in a month as well. Okay. So that's it. I will stop the recording here. If I can find the button. There we go. All right. So I think I went long. I try so hard not to go long. I'm gonna do the normal thing of getting the rendering started, and then I'll be back if anybody's hanging around, and we can chit chat, or we can just call it whenever. All right. So why don't we go back? Oh, so what do you think? At least we have a new waiting room video. Actually, I guess it might have restarted. Well, we'll let that go and then come back. already got the fans going because of the rendering. Um, that's such a drag. I mean, you'd think, computer scientist, right, supposed to know how to do these things. So, okay, so let me go check in on the live stream, folks, and say hi to folks. Oh, Anders. Um, Michael Wilder. So thanks so much, folks, for stopping by. Uh, um, let me just go through the comments, see if I got things to think about here. Uh, uh, yeah, hubris. David Kiersey, sir, what we're gonna say. Hubris is a good thing, and it really always is the death of a thousand cuts. How bad could it be having to wait a little extra longer, but then extra longer, and so forth. Uh, um, yeah, right. So Ben pointing out that the 2.5 billion years that evolution took to decide to go multicellular sounds like SpaceX. Uh, um, was doing it evolution's favorite way with mutations and unbelievably huge populations of species. And hopefully we won't need to we won't actually go that way. Yeah, what do you think, Junctor? um, I've always hated the word functor. The functional programming people use it because it's so it seems like it's so jargony, and obviously it means something really important and theoretical and formal. And okay, I got sort of a handle on functors eventually. When they started showing up in Java and so forth. But when I was working on junctions, I really ended up needing to have this distinction that the junction is actually an abstract thing that has a bunch of code associated with it. How to respond to this, how to respond to that, how to do the stuff to be a fish fin or a fish bod interaction. But the actual thing that was represented on the grid on the site is really basically just a little index saying which kind of junction are we supposed to be representing. So those two little bits, the thing that allows you to find a thing, that's the junctor. And when as you're having an event, you fetch those bits and you say, aha, I see this is a fish fin junction, and you actually make the junction object anew each time, each event, and populate it based on this event, and then ask it to decide what to do. And it comes up with one of these diamond stances saying which directions are good and which directions are bad. And that's working fairly well. But I like the word junker. Okay, all right. Thank you. You're welcome. Mario, how is the tiles managing their spatial locations? How many of the full matrix species? So the idea is that each tile, it thinks it's the center of the universe, and it does not have an address. It does not know that I am 0, 1, and so on and so forth. So when we plug these things together, it just starts to figure things out. Like, for example, we put these guys next to each other, and now this guy, we say he is east. This guy's east is this guy. This guy's west is this guy. It's all relative. And eventually, you get to somebody who doesn't have anybody connected to their west or north or whatever it is, and they are aware of that. They can tell whether they're connected to another tile or not, but they don't have any absolute location in space at all. I mean, if they're ever going to have that, they're going to have it just because they have sensors of some sort that they'll have touch sensors or something, or who knows, that will tell them that there's something out there that I might be, interested in or worried about or whatever it happens to be. Uh, um, so it sees the boundaries are completely real. There's none of this wrapping stuff around, and like we saw in the robustness demo where Lotus 2 just fell off the grid. And I'm completely amazed that there was not a crash storm there, and the whole thing survived for weeks more. And when the often when the stuff crashes, often the neighboring ones that are still there, they just think those tiles are taking a rather long time, and it's not until those tiles come back up and say, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, event number 62, there is no event number 62, that they get screwed up. So in fact, I was most worried about when I got the nice new Meanwell power supply. $28 a pop for the Meanwell power supply instead of something like 12 or 15 for those crap Ledmo, which now 2 or 3 of those Ledmo power supplies have failed. We'll see how well the Meanwell holds up, but I feel good about it. Anyway, it's more like that there is, when the power comes back up, that the whole thing crashes, and it didn't this time, so that was cool. Mario, I remember you saying we still need a master on each cluster. Well, not really. The idea is for just the execution, for the code running, that's all completely symmetric. Nobody is special on the grid at all, except that if the code they're running, like happens to have the center of a diamond with, DNA or, genetic information or important state information, whatever it is, then they become important because of the code that's running there, because of the software that's running there, not because the architecture said you are tile number 0 or whatever. Now, what you may be remembering is I have this idea of the keymaster, this white tile that in fact is where I compile all of the code, the physics that is going to run on the grid. And so at the level of physics, which is like defining an entire universe, that is centralized. And, I wish it wasn't, but, gotta walk before we fly. So the keymaster is distinguished by the fact that it actually has a private crypto key stored on it that allows it to sign the packages that it compiles. And therefore, when those packages then get distributed, and the keymaster doesn't have to be on the grid to do it, it can pass it along through anybody, because all of the tiles in the grid can check that they've been signed by the keymaster, and that's how they allow it to do it. So in that sense, in terms of the physics, the laws of physics of the universe, there is a master, a center, and that's where the code comes from. But the idea is that once we learn how to do this, that the code, the laws of physics won't change very often. Changing the laws of physics is like magic. And as far as we know, it doesn't really happen very often in our universe. And the idea is once we get, more than just a handful of rebels like us actually working on movable feast machine type ideas and figuring out, obviously there's a super clean way, 128 elements, whatever it is, that is really useful and flexible, and the right combination of flexibility without undue risk, then we could start building tiles that have that physics burned into them at manufacture time and be unchangeable. And at that point, there is no master at all. At that, the master has now been embedded in the physics, embedded in the physical machinery, and can no longer be changed. So in that sense, in the physics level, we currently have a master, but in the grid execution, no, it's completely symmetric. And you see, like when we look at one of these demos, I have to walk up to the grid and pick a random tile, pick any tile I like, and say, seed a start symbol, begin it there. There's no special place where the computation has to begin. We just have to have someone to deposit a single instance of the atom S, which is the start symbol, and then the whole thing unfolds from there. All right, thanks much. When the waiting room video is zoomed out, there's something about it that reminds me of screensavers on Windows 95 to 98 systems. Now, I don't know what Windows 95 98 systems looked like, so I say, okay, that's interesting, but I can't relate directly. But when it's only a few fishes, it feels, yeah, it does feel a lot more like an aquarium. I mean, I think they look a lot like fishes, despite the title card I used last month, where I had a sort of a goofy little cartoon fish sticking out of my head, like that. Um, Free subatoms, bound subatoms, vector subatoms. Okay, I don't know what that means. Uh, um, Weird unscientific question from Michael Wilding. How did you know you were a computer scientist versus a software engineer? It says it on my diploma. I went to the computer science department. I mean, kind of really uh, to be honest, when I was going to school, software engineering wasn't even a thing yet. There were computer engineers who made hardware, and there were computer scientists who made software. And the idea that there would be something to specializing in just the engineering of the software hadn't really come up. I mean, eventually, uh, after I was finished with grad school, for example, the place I went to, they started the Software Engineering Institute, SEI, something like that. Uh, um, but that was relatively later. And I have to say that, like a lot of scientists, I think, kind of, I used to look down on engineers a little bit. Because scientists, we were dealing with truth, the big truth, the foundational truth of everything. And engineers were using slide rules and wearing white shirts and thick glasses and shaving 10 cents off of a widget to sell for next year's widgets, like that. And it didn't feel that important. Doing the science felt important, and I now think I was kind of wrong and arrogant as far as that goes. And kind of what I'm trying to do with the whole idea of living computation, with the whole living computation thing, is say that there is structure to engineering. There is structure to computer architecture. And if you begin with the idea of definite scalability, if you begin with the idea that you have to make it so that it can go and go and go, and you can never cheat, you can never throw stuff behind the curtain. Like when I do woodworking and I'm trying to get the joints of a table to all line up, you can throw the errors from, legs that are sticking off in one direction or the other. You can throw the errors out and let them go and then just kind of sand the bottom until it sits. But when the thing comes around and closes, you can't throw the error anywhere, because you have to get it all to come out. And so that is where taking a systems approach to engineering, taking so I mean, it really is kind of in a, I don't actually exactly understand the relationship between definite scalability and sustainability, but there is something. There is some kind of connection there. So we'll see. So how did you know I was a computer scientist? I was a computer scientist because that was the only option, and I am now much prouder to say I'm a software engineer. Although FOMO. Software is getting so big and so articulated, and there's so much of it that you have to sort of be a sub software engineer. I mean, you can't really be a full stack software engineer anymore. Not the way I look at full stack. Uh, um, so I moved to Mastodon several months ago, and I was like, oh, this is cool. I should set up a Mastodon instance. for myself or for the Living Computation Foundation, where all the Living Computation Foundation nerds could come and we could nerd out and so forth. And I started looking at what was involved in setting up Mastodon. I don't want to learn all this. Once I've learned it, I don't want to remember it. I don't want to admit it. So at this point, I don't even know if I really call myself a software engineer. It's more of a research programmer is what I am. Anyway, thanks for the unscientific question. I like unscientific questions. And all right, picture frames are weirdly hard. Yes, indeed they are. Anders, what the status on the novel from last year? Oh, hey, Peter in 8787. This is so great that folks showing up. I thank you. I thank you all so much. I absolutely do. This is wonderful. So, Anders, it's been a long arc. It's been several years going. That the novel, the first year, whichever that was, trying to write 50,000 words on a novel, I ended up writing 30 something, 35 something, which was a chapter 1 and a chapter 2, and I had ideas about chapter 3, but not much of it actually existed. And the scary thing at the end of NaNoWriMo, the National Novel Writing Month then, was that it was so clear to me how slow I write. If I was just to multiply the rest of the chapters out, it was going to take a year, 2 years, even if I did nothing else. So my fantasies and in fact, the novel kind of expanded into a trilogy in my mind while I was thinking about it. But again, the thought of doing that for real, it's like, unless something changes, unless I get the ability to write much faster than I do, that would take the rest of my life. And if I did nothing else, and I got a lot of other stuff I want to do. So I put that aside, and in a subsequent year, I don't even know the exact timeline now, I took just chapter 2, and I boiled it down to a short story called Search Quiet Wake, which I actually sent out to a few science fiction magazines and got rejections from them, and understood, got my brought down a notch that, to actually make traditional, certainly slush pile science fiction to just come in, my story was not nearly readable enough. It was too confusing. There was too much jumping around. It was too hard to envision what was going on. And once I was, and certainly getting rejections from you folks, especially getting rapid rejections, made it easier for me to be able to see it from the outside and say, yeah, this requires a pretty specific reader. It's not sort of general purpose science fiction. And, I was buying copies of the science fiction magazines that I was sending them to, so I would have a sense of what it was. And I read some of the stories there, and, it's like, yeah, this is a science fiction story. And, it was clever or not, whatever it was going to a certain direction or whatever it was a little bit surprising or not really, and so on. But clearly my thing was not that. So what to do with Search Quiet Wake, this short story, remains a open question. And now that we've got the Living Computation Foundation publishing arm established, my current fantasy is, so the Search Quiet Wake is written by Vaughn Joy Manin, officially speaking. You look at the story, there it is. And Vaughn Joy Manin also wrote a big-ass scientific paper called The Path to Best Effort. And so one idea is to try to write something more, to get something else from Vaughn Joy Manin, and put them together into a little collection of writings by Vaughn Joy Manin and publish that with the Living Computation, with the Living Computation Foundation. Another possibility is to try to draw some pictures. Of course, now it's all like, why aren't you using Stable Diffusion and Midjourney and all that sort of stuff? But I feel like I don't want to learn that either. I feel like I would sort of cut the other way and just do, pen drawings with wiggly lines and no editing, author sketches and stuff. And make it sort of a children's book. I mean, because it is a short story, so trying to come out with a whole book for a short story seems a little bit tough, like that. So the collected writings of Vaughn Joy Manon is the current fantasy, but I think it needs at least a third piece, and it's unclear what that will be. But an extremely long answer to your question. Thank you, Anders, for that. And how are we doing here? Are we still rendering? Still rendering. Okay. Been reading Hyperion. Hyperion. I don't know if I know Hyperion. That's not John Varley. John Varley's. Did he do Hyperion? That one feels like it's also best for a specific type of reader, but it's still a classic. Yeah. So who wrote Hyperion? I don't know if I know it or not. And. Yeah, yeah. Once again, if I could just get that jerk Vaughn Joy Manon to cough up another piece of work, then we could make it happen. And we'll see. I mean, I gotta blow my nose. Okay. All right, Anders is going to go find out who wrote Hyperion. And so I ordered a copy. I ordered an autographed copy of Red Team Blues by Cory Doctorow. Dan Simmons. Oh yeah, okay. I have some Dan Simmons. I might have Hyperion. I'm not sure. Although most of my science fiction has gotten displaced by the T2 tile matrix. So I'm not sure exactly where I would look for my Dan Simmons if I had it. Anyway, what the hell was I saying? I don't know. It'll come back to me, or someone can remind me once we get through the time lag. Talk about the editing loop, an 8-minute editing loop. I don't know. This is something like 30 seconds behind real time, or whatever it is. All right. So maybe we could try and see if and I don't know what is going on with my my button stuff, which has gotten significantly worse. All right. Since I got this stuff all set up, and I have no idea what's going on. And this looks great. All right. Okay. So we could play with this a little bit for a minute here, just before we run out of time. So yeah, so these are the antennas, and right now they're set to grow out to length 4, but that's just easy to change, and the changing actually works. Let's get rid of this stuff, and so it has an in transmit EC, and EC is an edge coordinate. So this is an edge of the diamond, and so the negotiation for intercellular stuff is about what's your edge, what's my edge, how far apart are they, what are their relative positions, and what would we prefer it to be. So an antenna has a transmit edge coordinate. That's what it's actually copied from down here. Here's the HC point. That's the absolute position on the grid, which I was feeling bad about. So this guy says he's at -2, -3, and if we look at the antennas that's sticking out next to him, it's transmitting -2, -3, and then it has an offset, hops to edge, saying how far away is that. So it's 1, 1 here, 2, 2, 3, 3, and 4, 4. So each element of the antenna knows exactly the current value of the edge cord is for this particular thing, and what its relative position is, and so forth. They all have that. And if we stick in another, let's get another diamond going here. Okay. These things grow super fast. So the intercellular goo, it's funny, one of the things about it that I didn't really realize is that when the intercellular goo went through with a growth spurt, it had a period where it generated a whole lot of warnings, and the warnings flowed back up to the center and caused the root to not move and not grow for a while until everything settled down. But when I re-implemented it and got rid of the intercellular goo, got rid of the M sensors, got rid of the M tempo, got rid of a whole bunch of stuff, and made antenna plus just these M base things here, these little purple guys. Those are the only vestige of the old membrane. You know, M stood for membrane, M base, like that. Now there are very few warnings, and the whole thing grows much faster. And eventually I'm going to probably need to go back and retune how fast all that kind of stuff happens. But for the moment, I'm just saying, okay, great. So there it is. Now they've come in contact with each other. And now this one, well, you know, so the EC here is at -5, -4. So it's doing -5, -4 at 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4. And now this is the antenna of the other cell. And down here on the receive edge cord, here it is, -5, -4. Here's the hops the other way around from its edge. And now we're counting up 6, 6, 7, 7, 8, 8. So once we get to the cell, we can say, even though we are a long ways away, we're way outside the event window, we can say, okay, there's an edge that is oriented at 5, 4, from which we can tell the size of the diamond. The size of the diamond is going to be the sum of the absolute values of those things, +1 or -1, no, +1. So yeah, max hops here is 10, that's the size of the diamond. So absolute value of -5 plus -4 plus 1 is 10. And we can tell the orientation. And so that's given enough information. And now if we let this thing, actually, I don't think it'll work quite right. I have to do a little hacking by hand. You didn't see this. I'm going to deploy some of the junction stuff because, whoops, that is not the junction that we wish to deploy. Okay, there's that one, and maybe one over here. Okay. So now, now that these EGs have gotten configured correctly, their junctors have been set up. So yeah, there it is. If you can see it, junction index provider storage. That's what the junctor does, and it gives the index. The index is 2, which means it's a fish bod to fish fin junction. And actually, I did the same thing on both sides, so these both think they're fish bods connecting to fish fins, which is kind of like Mike Levin making the planaria with 2 heads or something like that. It really doesn't matter very much right now. But the main way that the two junctions differ is that one of them wants to be further away. So the fin wants to be closer to the bod than the bod wants to be to the fin. So it's the cocktail party thing where if it works, and it's working kind of, the fin crowds in a little closer because that's what its junction says to do, and then the bod's junction says, "Ooh, that's too close," so it tells the bod to go away, so the thing moves away from its fins. That was the goal. And it starts emitting these white things here. These are the diamond stances. And so the stance says, I don't want to go, I don't remember all the coding, 4 for good north, south, east, west, 4 for bad north, south, east, west, and so on. And those the diamond stances all flow up toward the root, but there's no clogging up because whenever they run into each other, they just merge together so that only the highlanders actually reach to the whole thing, and that's how it works, or that's how it's supposed to work. There's been a whole lot of time trying to get this actually doing this basic idea, and we're kind of there now. And the one little video, it's so pitiful looking, but just the fact that the fins were servoing quite tight, they were not getting way out and having to try to hurry up and come back in. They were closing the loop pretty well. Their OODA loop was fairly tight. Is in large part, well, number one, because we got rid of the intercellular goo and went with the antenna, we got much more accurate information, and because of just sort of trying to do it, trying to be a little bit more efficient, we also got fresher information. I mean, for example, when one of these antennas has an event, the obvious thing to do would be to just take the upstream signal from your upstream guy and put it to you, and take the downstream signal from your downstream guy and put it to you, and then be done. That's all you need to do, and then everybody will do that and it'll all come out right. But the antenna actually does more. It tries to pull it in and push it out in one event if it can. Same thing with the other direction, so that the signals move up to two sites at once during a single event, because my goal was to try to get reasonably fresh information to the junction, and then from the junction to the controller up at the root, and that's where we're at. I mean, all of this is. Well, why don't we turn this off? Okay. All of this is really a sort of a weird thing. Yeah, they look like cilia, and it's hard to know. Okay, I lost the thread. Whatever it is, because I was looking at your comments. Is it more robust to have the antenna stuck together, adjacent to each other? And I don't. If the servoing is working the way I kind of want it, they actually end up, even though the antennas are like several apart, they actually end up more or less being tip to tip, or I mean, depending on how far apart the junction says to be, they may be stepping on each other so that they can't go out all the way to length 4, and they're only doing length 3 because then they are on top of each other or whatever it is. That's all fine. But if they're out of whack to each other, they take that into consideration. So instead of going 1 1 2 2 3 3 4 4, then it'll be 5 6 if one of them is off in one direction or the other. So they'll pass the coordinate information based on the relative position of his antenna versus my antenna, like that. Is it more robust? I don't know. One of the interesting things to me about trying to do this is that the whole membrane structure, like the intercellular goo, it has to tolerate significant amounts of slop, because the whole point is that the diamond cells move independently of each other. If they choose to move together, coordinated movement, which is what I've been trying to do since January, they're doing that as an agentic sort of thing. They have the ability to move on their own, but they can choose to move together. And that's what I was thinking about before, that, biological cells have these cell adhesion molecules and all of this stuff to allow them to stick together and actually transmit physical force from one cell to the next. And they get the ability to do that from the fact that they're self-hosting on natural physics. They can push an atom just physically push it, and now the force is being pushed in that direction. Whereas we're using a bespoke physics, we have this underlying ether in effect. The cellular automata hardware is a fixed ether that everybody imagined existed in our universe until Einstein said no, like that, and Michelson Morley and so on. So we don't have that, and so for us with the ether, it's hard to know what force means, because I'm sitting here, he's sitting there. If I wanted, I could write a rule that when this executed, it would take this guy and push him one square that way, and we could call that force. But it's not really, and the is that a good thing to happen, or because is it not? And I think about this a lot. I don't know what the answer is, but it feels like the HC3 grid, where it can wiggle by distorting the grid a little bit. It has these motion waves passing through it from the root, spreading out. Go north, go north, go north, go north, go north, whatever it is. That the distortion in that grid, you can interpret it as force. You can interpret it as stress. And it makes me feel like a different next generation movable feast machine architecture might take something like that and build it in at a lower level, build in force updating, force transmutation at a more architectural level, so that you'd be able to have sort of a clear meaning what it would mean to say I am pushing this thing, whether it wants to be pushed or not. See, that's the problem with what we have now, that all the pushing is cooperative. You push, I have to be pushed, like that. And so that's an idea that maybe each atom could have a few extra bits, sort of summing up its net forces from one direction or another, or something like that. That again would not be manipulable directly by the transition function code, but would instead be managed automatically, as far as the neighbors pushing on you and you pushing back on them, and so on and so on and so forth. Anyway, okay, so that's it. That's our hour. Thanks, folks. You come wind me up. It doesn't take much, but I think there's fun stuff here, and I think it's kind of super cool actually. But it's very involved, so it's only the folks that actually want to do it. Eventually, the antenna will transmit other information besides movement. Well, I wonder about that. Whenever I'm implementing this stuff, I always try to preserve as many bits inside the atom as possible, so that in the future, there could be a little packet channel or some little groove or something that could just ride on top of the antenna structure, and take into consideration the fact that antennas get chopped off and stepped on by each other and so forth. Whatever the particular structure you have, it provides the ability to do stuff, but it also has its liabilities and its lack of determinism, and so on and so forth. So yeah, we'll see. The antenna, on the one hand, they could just be a guide, things atoms outside moving along, following it, or they might actually be able to have some bit channel inside it, having signals flowing back and forth. We'll see. Okay, folks. This was a lot of fun. Thank you again. And I hope to see as many folks as possible here in June. It's May, and now we're talking June, and that's the last month of Multicellular Menagerie. Oh boy. We'll see how it goes. Okay, I'm gonna stop the stream, and thanks everybody for coming, and yakking it up. So I hope to see you next time.